Go to PressBoxOnline.com and register a youth team in your community for a chance to be highlighted as the PressBox Youth Team of the Month, sponsored by Sports Authority. Go to PressBoxOnline.com for all the details. And welcome back to Inside PressBox. Time now to talk fantasy baseball with Ken Zalis, owner of FansFantasyFootball.com, and fantasy baseball expert Eric Radom. And Ken, you and I have worked together for a good while now. I know I respect you a lot on fantasy football. Your site now is getting active in baseball.
We are. We've been asked for years, do you do any other fantasy sports? We always had to say no. Fantasy baseball, I've played since the early 80s. And it was about time, to get into it. And it's a little bit much for me to do because I'm still doing the football now. It's 24/7, 365.
So who's this gentleman
we brought
to your right?
Eric Radom on, who is my fantasy baseball expert. I go to him for advice, and I figured, let's get into it. Let's do it the right way. And he'll do for fantasy baseball what I did for football.
All right, let's assume for a moment that our viewers, if they're interested in this and aren't turning the dial already, know the basic rules of fantasy baseball, okay? So let's start with some pitchers. We each put up 5 pitchers we're interested in knowing about. Let's start with one that you put up, which was Matt Latos, acquired by the Cincinnati Reds.
I really like Matt Latos this year. I think he's being undervalued because he has been traded to the Cincinnati Reds, and that's a much tougher hitter's park than in San Diego with Petco Park. And but if you look at his numbers on the road in his career as opposed to at home, they're not that different.
How about you, Ken? Michael Pineda, acquired from the Yankees in one of the more blockbuster type trades of 2 young players.
Yeah, I mean, young pitcher, but he's in New York, so right away in my book he's elevated. He's going to get wins. He's going to get run support. It's the matter of how consistent can he be. He was kind of up and down last year. Young pitchers will be inconsistent, but you got to love the arm. You'll get high strikeouts, and I think the win total goes up.
All right, I'm not going to answer my own players. What do you think of Joe Nathan this year in Texas? Was that a bold move that's going to pay off or a flop move by the Rangers?
I wouldn't call it a bold move, but I think it's going to pay off. I think he proved in the second half to be healthy last year, and he may never be the same dominant, top 5 closer in the future, but he's going to be good.
Ken, how about Brian Mattis, who's on my list?
Look, I don't even know if he's draftable to me. I mean, because you don't know what he's going to do. I mean, again, are you getting the Brian Mattis that came up and we saw all the promise as a rookie, or are we getting the Brian Mattis that had to be gone to the minor leagues?
Still looking for his groove.
They're celebrating because he hit 91 on the radar gun. I'm like, well, that's great. Can you throw more than 88 consistently, though?
One more pitcher, Ubaldo Jimenez, Cleveland. Are his best days behind him? Did Dan O'Dowd pick their pockets on that one?
Well, it remains to be seen, but I believe that he's 28 years old and he's coming off of 2 great years of throwing 96 to 98 miles per hour. I think he's just needs to fix his mechanics and he'll be good.
All right, let's move on to some hitters. On my list, Ken, is one of my favorites, Nolan Reimold.
Oh, and he's not one of mine. I mean, this is a guy that, to me, had 1 good year in the minors and had 2 months that he did well in the major leagues. He's a 270 lifetime hitter, and the Orioles think they're going to have a leadoff guy with him. I don't get it. To me, he's totally undraftable.
All right. Radom, how about you on Paul Goldschmidt, first baseman, Arizona?
Paul Goldschmidt, out of all the hyped up, first-year players, he's one of the only ones that's actually going in a place where you would want to draft him, and I really like him. He's got huge power, and he's not going to strike out as much as he did last year, and he's going to even steal a couple bases.
All right, how about Luke Scott on my list as a designated hitter, now with Tampa Bay? Will he come back with 20-plus homers?
He could come back with 20 home runs. Tropicana Field is not nearly as good for left-handed power hitters as Camden Yards is. And, we'll have to see. I think I heard he was still having pain in the shoulder. And also Joe Madden likes to switch things around a lot, so at-bats might be a problem.
All right, Ken, you had 2 players on your list that I unfortunately had last year on my team, which was Joe Mauer.
Right.
Mysterious illness, with the leg weakness. And then Adam Dunn, who was just
an absolute disaster.
Exactly. What are they going to come back and do this year?
Look, for Adam Dunn, I just, you kept on last year. I couldn't believe how bad it was and how it kept on getting.
Sticking with him.
You had to.
I said, well, he's got to finally.
He's got to find his groove.
depressing.
But this year, again, you know, he's a guy that you're probably going to be able to steal in drafts and pick up. You know, if you're in an auction type league, $1, $2, because nobody's going to take him early. And if you're in a redraft league, you probably get him late in 18th, 19th round. So there's no harm in taking a guy that has 30 home run potential. I think Joe Mauer's fine. It's really going to be interesting to me is how much he catches and how much they move him to first base. If he's a double qualifier, he's got even more value this year.
One last player, he was on my list. I think he's an absolute stud, is Brett Lowry, Toronto. What do you think he's worth, Eric?
I think he's he could be an absolute stud in the future, but I think that he's being overvalued a little bit this year, being taken, like amongst David Wright, and I'd rather just have David Wright, and I got him about 8th.
Ken Zalis, Eric Radom from fansfantasyfootball.com. Don't let the name fool you, though. They now have baseball, rotisserie baseball, fantasy baseball on the site. Thanks, guys. We'll be back in just a minute. Don't go away. Inside PressBox is presented by Friedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. Go to Friedmont.com now for all of your mortgage needs.